Mhm. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Phillips. I'm the journals manager at the University of Florida Press, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. We're co-hosting the webinar with the University of Florida Press and our Forensic Anthropology journal. This seminar will discuss some best practices for submitting your work to academic journals and university presses. We'll also discuss the publishing process from the perspective of press staff and journal editors, including tips on preparing manuscripts, the peer review process, and working with a publisher. We're gearing this presentation toward graduate students and early career professionals who might be working to publish their work for the first time or in the early process of submitting their work. And here are a few pointers and guidelines for today's panel. This webinar is being recorded. After the webinar, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel, Florida Press. Registrants will receive an email after the webinar with a link to the recording. Closed captioning has been enabled for this webinar. To view the closed captioning, please click on closed caption in your meeting controls. If you have a question for the panelists during the presentation, please put your question in the Q&A box. Questions will be addressed in the Q&A session after the presentation is finished. Now here's a rundown of our panelists. Mary Puckett is Associate Editor in the Acquisitions Department at the University Press of Florida. Dr. Nicholas Passalacqua is an editor of Forensic Anthropology and Associate Professor and Director of Anthropology at Western Carolina University. And Dr. Michael Kennyhurst is the podcast editor and producer for Forensic Anthropology and a forensic anthropologist at the Department of Defense POW MAA Accounting Agency. Okay. And with that, I will go ahead and get started with my presentation. So I wanted to start off just giving a quick introduction to university press publishing. University presses are all nonprofit, and so we're mission-based entities. We're an extension of our parent institution. So for the University Press of Florida, that means that we represent numerous universities around the state. We're housed at the University of Florida. We focus on work of scholarly merit that sometimes means it's not necessarily for mass audiences, but can be for specialists or niche audience. We publish things that for-profit publishers might otherwise not decide to take on. We have some general interest publishing at Florida. It's Florida studies or things having to do with the state of Florida. And we generally serve the public good by publishing this knowledge that other people might not put out. All of our content goes through peer review. The publications are approved by an advisory board of academics from our parent institution. For journals, this means a faculty board from the University of Florida. We receive financial support from our parent institutions, and we are not for profit. We pick and choose our subject areas. Each university press has their own specialties in which they publish. For the University of Florida Press, our major subject areas are archaeology and anthropology, Latin American and Caribbean studies, geography and sustainability. Our journals program is fairly new. We just started publishing journals at the University of Florida Press in 2015, specifically to serve the University of Florida. We have an editorial board of University of Florida professors that has been established to peer review all of our journals before they're accepted for publication. And we have 10 journals in various disciplines. Some of them are connected with the university, but many of them have editors who are not affiliated with the University of Florida. Once the journal is approved by the editorial board, we work with the journal editors in the association to outline our specific partnership. So we do different things for different journals depending on the subject area and the needs of the editors, the authors, the readers. The beginning of the journal process happens outside the university press. And that is what you will hear from the journal editors later today. All of the peer review on specific journal articles is handled by the journal editors who are not at the press. Once articles have been accepted for publication, that's when we go into copy editing, typesetting, all of the things that the press handles. We basically take on a project management role. And so once an article has been accepted, we usher it through publication, both online and then print publication. We print all of our titles on demand. So even though there's a lessening demand for print copies of scholarly journals, we still have them available because the technology has gotten to the point where we can print one copy at a time with pretty good quality. Some of the things that we do for our journals and journal editors are provide a manuscript submission system like Scholar One. We have a professional freelance copy editors that go through every article. Authors get to see their copy edited manuscript before it's typeset to reevaluate anything and check over the edits. Then we take the Word documents and transform them into the PDFs, the XML and the HTML that you see for final publication. And authors again get to review their proofs at the PDF stage one last time before we publish it. This is the last time that authors get to view their article before publication. And it's important to note that the press staff are typically not experts in the field. We tend to pick up things here and there, for example, with archaeology and anthropology, but we do not have PhDs in the field. And so it's really up to the authors to make sure that the factual content is correct. And we're there as support for formatting, consistency, and style guides. We also handle the publication and administration, so a dedicated journal website where people can download articles. We handle subscription management and back issue fulfillment, customer service. We do some marketing for our journals. It's best with anthropology and archaeology. We also have a big book list in that subject. And so we can market our books and journals together. And then finally, the press registers copyright in our name for the journal. Journals publishing is definitely very digital in nature, even more so than our books program. The priority is to get articles online so that people can find them in various ways, whether they're reading the journal or if they're searching for a specific topic in a web platform or a database, such as Project Muse or EBSCO or ProQuest. So the press tries to keep these relationships so that all of our journals are as discoverable as possible. One thing that I did want to point out to this group is the publication agreement. When you get your article accepted by a journal, you will be asked to sign a publication agreement with the press that outlines the rights of the press and the rights of you as an author. Make sure to read this agreement. It outlines specific items that you might have questions on, including where and when you can reuse and republish your article, and particularly our open access policies. I think open access is one of the top questions that we get from authors. When can I make my article freely available? This is particularly important because publicly funded research needs to be available. So funders such as the National Institutes of Health have rules on when content can be available online. Right now, that typically is 12 months after publication. And there are different rules on which funders require the final PDF or if a preprint will be acceptable. The university press has a pretty generous green open access policy. Green open access is also self-archiving. So immediately upon acceptance, we allow authors to post the accepted article or preprint of their article in an institutional repository or a nonprofit personal website. And then we allow them to post the final PDF after a 12-month embargo period. This is, I think, pretty typical and in keeping with all of the funding rules from publicly funded research. We also offer gold open access, which is the author pays model. So our journals have hybrid open access policies in which if an author would like to pay a processing fee to make the final PDF freely available immediately upon publication, we can do that as well. And at the end here, I just put some links up. The UF Press website, the Association of University Presses has some valuable research, has some valuable resources for not only university press staff, but I think also editors and authors. And then finally, at the end is a blog that's pretty well known to us in the university press community, the Scholarly Kitchen. That's a really useful tool that can keep you up to date, especially on publicly funded research, new mandates that are coming across in that area, and just trends in the field. Okay, and with that, I will turn it over to Mary Puckett, Associate Editor at the University of Florida Press.
Thanks, Lauren. Let me start my presentation. Oh. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Mary. I'm the acquisitions editor for archaeology at the press. And since the publication process for books is pretty similar to the process that Lauren talked about for journals, I wanted to talk today specifically about creating a book proposal. So as I mentioned, I'm the acquisitions editor for archaeology, and we publish in all kinds of subject areas within that, including bioarchaeology, forensic anthropology, southeastern archaeology. And this is just a picture of some of our recent titles. It includes other disciplines like anthropology and sustainability. And before I start, I just want to emphasize that acquisitions editors want to hear from you about your book project, even in the very earliest stages. And there are a couple of ways that you can connect with acquisitions editors. One is to identify what press you want to publish your book with, and then visiting that press's website to find out the right acquisitions editor to contact. And you can just email the acquisitions editor with your question or idea. You can try to get to know editors by following their platforms on social media. You can talk to colleagues who may have worked with that press in the past to find out about their experience. And then generally every university press will have some instructions on how to submit a letter of inquiry or a proposal. So those are good places to start. And so now I'll talk about the proposal itself. When you're putting your proposal together, you should think about the purpose of the proposal, and that's to convey the argument of your book and the stakes of the argument. You should be able to show who will be interested in reading your book. You should demonstrate that you're capable of writing the book, and you should be able to provide your editor with your vision and plan for the book. And another thing to keep in mind when you're writing the proposal is the proposal's audience. And the audience for the proposal isn't necessarily the same audience as the book audience. So the people who will be reading the proposal are your acquisitions editor, other members of the press, could potentially be peer reviewers. And it's also a chance for you, the author, to think through the details of your vision for the book. And this will be your chance to engage your acquisitions editor and get them on board, because they'll be your biggest advocate for your book to the rest of the press. And this is a list of the components to include in your book proposal. I'm going to talk about each of these in more detail, but the list is a title. You should have a description of the project. You should identify the market and audience for your book, list comparable book titles, include the schedule, so when the manuscript will be ready, and specs, that's short for specification. So how long is the book? How many images do you want to include? We'll need information about you as the author or the editor, and the annotated table of contents. So when you think about the proposed title and subtitle, keep in mind that the title is above all a marketing tool. And so it's a good idea to include the main keywords for your book to help your readers discover the book online. This is kind of something that we encourage authors to prioritize over like a more decorative title, because it's much better for discoverability. The description and overview of the project. This is typically like a 2-page document where you focus on the big overarching argument of your book. There will be sub-arguments that you will have. You can elaborate more on those when you write your annotated table of contents. But for the description, we just need the main argument. We need you to tell us why your book matters, how it's situated in other scholarship on the same topic, and include a description of the methodology that you used for your research, whether it was archival work or ethnography, or some other archaeological field work. We ask authors to identify the market and audience for their books. This helps us know how to get the book in the hands of the readers who will want to read the book. So the audiences could be scholarly, it could be undergraduate students, practitioners like CRM folks. The term general audience isn't as helpful as an identifier for the audience. It's just very vague. University presses don't expect all books to be bestsellers. So it's very important here to be realistic about who the audience for your book is. That's just helpful for the press. We also ask for a list of comparable titles or comp titles. And these can include books that your work is in conversation with, books that perhaps your project has built on, books with a similar audiences, those are really helpful, or with a similar methodology. And we prefer these to be fairly recent publications within the past 5 years. And it's always helpful to include at least one book from the press's list, just to demonstrate that your book does fit in with other books that the press has published in the past. The schedule and specifications, this includes a realistic timeline. So think about how much time you will need to finish the manuscript for peer review. Make sure you give yourself enough time to work on the book and be realistic about that with your editor. And also you should know about how long the book is going to be in terms of word length. And you should have an estimate number of images and tables that you want to include. And if there are any other special features, you should discuss those with your acquisitions editor at the proposal stage. We ask authors to include CVs as part of their proposal, but you can also write a brief bio for the text portion of the proposal. That can be helpful. This is a place where you can highlight parts of your CV that you want your press audience to be aware of, or you can discuss anything in this written bio that may be unclear in the CV. So it's just another opportunity to tell the press who you are. And as I said before, the annotated table of contents is just a brief summary of each chapter. This helps show your editor that you have a plan for the book. It shows us how you will work towards the broader argument that you talk about in your overview. And these are short, 1 to 2 paragraphs at most. And it helps us know that you have a plan and that you've thought through the book. I get a lot of questions about revising dissertations. UPF, or the press, does not publish unrevised dissertations. So if you want to publish your dissertation as a book, you should be prepared to totally reorganize it, to transform it into a book. This could mean reorganizing chapters so that your argument is front and center. You would want to scrub any elements of the dissertation, like the literature review. You may need to revise the text so that your voice speaks with more authority. You're writing for your peers now and not your dissertation committee. So you should have a strong voice in the book. And there's a book that I list here, From Dissertation to Book by William Germano, that can be a very helpful resource if you want to turn your dissertation into a book. So you should only submit a proposal when you have a clear idea for your book and a solid timeline. And if you're working towards that, in the meantime, you can present your research at conferences to get some feedback from colleagues. You can talk to different colleagues about their experience with university presses to try to start identifying the right press for your work. And you can talk to editors at any point, as I mentioned before, even if it's in the early stages. And I think this is the part that differs most from journal acquisitions. For books, the process is to submit a proposal, and then once the proposal is accepted by the press, you submit the manuscript for peer review. The manuscript then undergoes peer review, and once we have recommendations from peer reviewers for publication, we get final publication approval from the faculty editorial board, and then your acquisitions editor will work with you to prepare the final manuscript for editorial. And here are just a couple more additional resources. Lauren mentioned the AU Press's website, and I'll talk about that next a little bit for books. But William Germano has another book, Getting It Published, that can be helpful for new book authors. And I would also recommend Laura Portwood Stacer's book on writing book proposals. That could be very helpful. And Lauren already talked about the AUP, but as I said before, it offers some really helpful resources for preparing a book proposal. It also has a nice question and answer page for prospective authors who just want to learn more about the publication process with university presses. And then this is what I mentioned earlier. If you're trying to find the right publisher for your book, you want to find a publisher who publishes books in your subject area, who publishes on topics that you write about, because that can be helpful for marketing and finding the right readership. And there's this subject area grid that the AUP has put out that lists different disciplines and then the different university presses that publish in those disciplines. And so that can be a good place to start. I would start here and then maybe visit those presses' websites to see if there are books that are similar to yours there. And if you have any questions about book proposals, my contact information is listed here and the other editor's information is listed here too. But like I said, if you want to reach out to an acquisitions editor at any press, we're always happy to hear from you. And I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Mary. And next we have Nicholas Passalacqua and Michael Kennyhurst, editors of Forensic Anthropology.
Look at that. Mike, great to see you.
Good to see you, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Thanks to all of y'all for attending. So I'm going to try to share my screen here, and I'll probably blow it because that's my thing. Let's see. Is that working? What am I even sharing right now? Does it look like a PowerPoint?
It does.
Okay. I just don't see that green box that you usually see. Is the slides progressing?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. Okay. So I quickly introduce myself. So I'm Nick Passalacqua. I'm currently the editor-in-chief, technically, of the journal Forensic Anthropology. Me and the other editors, Angie and Alex, all kind of worked on some of these slides. And then Mike is also here. He put some of these slides together. I'm going to try to represent more of the kind of overall editor perspective, and then Mike's going to try to represent some of the associate editor perspective, as he's one of our associate editors. He's also, I don't know, our podcaster in chief, or whatever title you want to go by, Mike, but
podcast czar, perhaps.
Podcast czar, yeah. So he's going to talk about some of the podcasting that he's been doing, kind of based on the journal, which was all Mike's idea. So he deserves all the credit for all that stuff. And then, you know, some of y'all that might know Mike and I think we're both pretty laid back. And we both really like publishing and like the process of kind of like disseminating work through scholarly avenues and stuff. And so, feel free to ask us any types of questions you want, either in the chat. I guess probably the chat or the QA is probably really good. And then as we go through these slides, maybe we'll try to wait for Q&A till the end, unless something pops up that really makes sense to interrupt us with. Kat Kat has a great question about guitars. I'll let Mike answer that however he would like.
Yeah, the answer is 6.
I don't see any warlocks in the background though, so that's kind of a disappointing, Mike. Okay, so the origins of the journal. So many years ago, the original editors, which was myself, Angie Christensen, and Joe Hefner, were all kind of bemoaning the lack of places to publish in forensic anthropology. This was probably 2015-ish, a while ago. And, as we were kind of talking about how JFS is great, but, it'd be great to have other options that were more forensic anthropology specific and not just kind of general forensic science journals. We decided that maybe we would try to get a journal set up. And so we kind of had pitched this idea to some publishers, and University of Florida Press was not just excited about it, or I guess not just interested, but excited about it. And we had just really great kind of collaborations with the University of Florida Press in those early days, as we continue to do, of course. And so it really was a clear standout for us in terms of a venue that we would try to kind of go down to publish a journal dedicated to forensic anthropology. And so, some of the things that we had kind of hoped that this journal would do when we first started out was not just be a new place where people could publish forensic anthropology manuscripts, but a place where they could publish stuff that other journals were kind of publishing, it appeared to us at least, with less frequency, things like case studies, which we think have a lot of scholarly value, at least that they're done well. And so we really wanted to make sure that there was an avenue to publish those things. And then we also, at least me, I guess I won't speak for everybody in this one, but I'm a big fan of special issues. And so we felt like, a place where people could do kind of, almost light, edited volumes light or something as special issues was really a great opportunity with which University of Florida Press was all about. And then I won't talk too much about it, but we have kind of continued to iterate or expand on these things that we think people are interested in or people have reached out to us about. So things like book reviews, we brought in Greg Berg to be our book review editor, and then things like scholarly biographies of folks, which Diane France is currently the editor for. So the point being that I think we're really happy to continue to iterate and expand on the idea of what the journal is and can be for the forensic anthropology community. So one thing that I think people don't necessarily know or appreciate about journals is how much work goes into them from not just the editorial board and the associate editors, but also the reviewers. And I've heard rumor that sometimes editorial people are paid, but we're definitely all volunteers here, and we all volunteer our time to make this journal a success. And that's not just the editors and the reviewers, but it's also like the guest editors for special issues and stuff. I mean, we're all doing this because we are nerds that love forensic anthropology and want to disseminate our scholarship in this way. And so I think it's really cool that our journal is essentially staffed or operated by not just volunteers, but people that are passionate about forensic anthropology. One thing that came up recently is somebody was asking why we didn't have kind of like big names on the editorial board to kind of draw people in. And it's something that I think never occurred to any of us, because we want people that are going to be active in forensic anthropology in terms of scholarship. And so I know some journals will put big names on there just to kind of draw people in, but they don't actually get assigned papers to, manage as editors or associate editors. And that's just not, I think, how we ever envision the journal operating, because it is volunteers. And so the more people you bring in as figureheads, the more work ends up falling to everybody else. And we really want to try to disseminate the workload as evenly as possible, so that we're all kind of, in it together doing our thing. So that being said, not only do we try to have people on the editorial board that will actually do their jobs as associate editors, as unpaid volunteers, but we try to have a really big breadth of viewpoints on the editorial board. And by editorial board, I really mean primarily the associate editors, which, occasionally rotate on and off. And so we try to have people that are in academia, try to have people that are at the DPAA, people at medical examiner or coroner offices, international humanitarian organizations like the ICRC or the CMP. And we're also trying to represent the other forensic anthropology organizations. So the ABFA, the Latin American Forensic Anthropology Association, the Society of Forensic Anthropologists, and any other organizations that might be interested, reach out to us, and we're happy to try to bring people in, because our idea is for the journal to be successful, we want to have as broad of a contributorship and audience as possible. And so we really want to try to have an editorial board that also reflects that diversity. So this is just a quick look at how the editorial board is currently set up. So I'm the editor-in-chief, which is really editor in name only. Angie and Alex, we all three of us really share the workload really evenly. Diane France is our editor of biographies. Greg Berg is our book review editor. Mike Kennyhertz is an associate editor, but also podcast czar, as we already discussed. And then Michaela Spiros has been managing, again, as a volunteer, all of our social media and marketing and all that stuff. And she does some pretty amazing work with graphics that I'm not sure how she does. It's really good. And then we list all of our associate editors there. Associate editors, they're volunteers, and they also rotate on and off. So usually every few years we try to have one or two rotate off. And then of course we always put out the call, would anyone like to rotate off, or would you like to stay? That type of thing. Okay, what we look for in submissions. So I'll talk about it kind of more mechanically, but Mike, if you have any thoughts about what makes good submissions, feel free to chime in. So the journal itself, the manuscript submission system on our side, asks these questions. So it asks, does the manuscript contain new and significant information to justify publication? Does the abstract clearly and accurately describe the content of the article? Is the problem significant and concisely stated? Are the methods described comprehensively? Are the interpretations and conclusions justified by the results? Is adequate reference made to other work in the field? Is the language acceptable? And then please rate the priority for publishing the article. And then there's some other boxes there where it asks about article length, number of tables, number of figures. Basically, is it too many? Is it too few? Or is it adequate? And then there's overall ratings for interest, quality, originality, and then overall for the paper. And so, these are things that the editors, so me, Angie, and Alex, basically do as kind of our first administrative review of the paper. And I wouldn't say that any of these are necessarily deal breakers if we would answer no, is the problem significantly consistently stated, concisely stated, excuse me. If we say no, that doesn't mean it's an automatic reject, but it is going to mean that there's going to be feedback to the author that they need to clarify that maybe in future revisions of the paper. Mike, what do you think? You have other thoughts about what makes good submissions or successful publication submissions?
We discussed it a little bit later in the presentation, but for me, a big thing is the structure of the paper and making sure that you have everything where it should be. You're not mixing your materials and methods in with your results. You're not discussing new things you did to the data when you didn't describe why you did it to begin with. It's just very structural issues that make a paper hard to read and get its importance from. So structure. And the other big thing is the overuse or misuse of tables and figures. The point of a table or figure is to encapsulate a bunch of different ideas into one spot to save yourself text, right? So you don't have to write all about it. But if you're only putting out one idea in a table that you could just say in less than a sentence, that table is unnecessary. Same with the figure. Try to think about best ways to cross-utilize those to convey many ideas, because that's a much more powerful way to do it that saves yourself text and cuts out a bunch of unnecessary tables. I just hate unnecessary tables, but that might just be a personal thing for me. That's about it for now.
Perfect. Yeah, one thing that I think it's the way that I try to think about papers, and maybe it's not the best way to think about it, but you are communicating, right? This written manuscript is you communicating your research to an audience. And hopefully, if you're publishing in this journal, your audience is primarily forensic anthropologists, but whatever, right? And so I think what makes a successful paper or an unsuccessful paper in many ways is just the communication used in that paper. Is it successfully communicating what was done to the correct audience or not? All right, let's keep rolling.
Nick, did you see there's a question? What is an ideal length to aim for? Or is there minimum, maximum for length that would be helpful to know?
Yeah. So I think on the UF Press website, there's some like word limit suggestions for manuscripts. I'll say, and maybe Lauren can jump in and correct me, but I think those are guidelines. Like if the requirement's 10,000, you go to 11,000 words. I don't know that that's an automatic rejector or deal breaker or anything, but generally research manuscripts are longer than a technical note, which is longer than a commentary, whatever else. So generally there are word limits just to kind of guide things. I mean, like if you look at some of those papers from like the 1900s, right? They're like 80 pages long. They're like mini books, so you were not trying to, publishing something like that's really difficult because it's essentially like an entire issue. So you want to have just kind of reasonable lengths for things, I would say.
Yeah, and I would add that as a good rule of thumb, get or practice saying exactly what you mean as concisely as possible. Nobody wants to read a paragraph to get one idea across, right? A big goal of technical writing is to say exactly what you mean, that the words can't be minced, so don't add fluff if it's unnecessary. And that is a skill. You get better at identifying what is the main point that I need to convey, what's the best way to convey it. And that just takes practice.
For sure. I know that there are some people that think like, wow, I read this article and I couldn't understand a word of it. This person must be so smart. And I'm a big believer in the opposite, right? If I read an article and I can't understand what's going on, the person maybe is smart, but they're a bad writer and a bad communicator.
Yeah. If you can't explain it simply to somebody, then you probably don't understand it to the point you need to get to that point.
What a burn. All right. So how the process totally works, you submit a paper, then a paper is going to go for an administrative review by the editors being currently myself, Angie, and Alex. And we're going to answer those questions that you saw on that slide a minute ago about the paper length and quality and number of figures and stuff. And we're also going to read the paper and make sure that the paper fits for the journal. Is it actually a paper about forensic anthropology, or is it actually about something else? And maybe it would be more successful in a different journal, that type of thing. And then, we are going to consider who on our editorial staff would be a good choice to kind of manage the peer review of this paper. And then we're going to assign it out. So maybe there's a paper on, I don't know, teeth. And I think, okay, well, I know Mike had a dissertation that was on teeth or something. I don't really remember, but
thanks.
I'll assign it to Mike because he knows a lot about teeth. And not only does he know a lot about teeth, but he knows a lot about people that also study teeth. And so not only can he comment on that paper, but he can also assign reviewers, because he knows that community of scholars best, that are going to be best able to give reviews on that paper. And so we're going to assign it to one of our associate editors, who's then going to assign that paper out to reviewers. Those reviewers are going to provide their comments. Those comments are going to go to the associate editor. That associate editor is going to read those comments, add comments themselves as needed, and then make a suggestion back to the editors for what should happen to that paper. Anything I'm missing, Mike?
I would say also that as an associate editor, you get to judge the quality of the peer reviewers as well. And we keep metrics on the peer reviewers who give helpful feedback and those that maybe aren't so helpful or timely. But that is another, I think, important step of this, is that we make sure that we are only assigning out like high quality peer reviewers that are going to give high quality feedback, as opposed to a contrarian type of situation, which we've run into, and we'll just reassign, we'll get a different reviewer, because that's not the goal of this. It's not, a lot of people think this is an adversarial process, but it's not. It's about getting better and defending your ideas. And that's just something you have to get used to. And this process overall, I think, makes you better at doing that.
Yeah, totally agree. So these editorial decisions are primarily, I would say, like, I don't know, 90% or something, based on the feedback of the reviewers. And by that, I mean, if both reviewers say this paper isn't a good fit, or there's problems with the research, it should be rejected, then odds are the associate editor is going to say it should also be rejected, and the editor will say, I agree, it should be rejected. Now, there are times when the associate editor might say, I think maybe this paper still has merit. Let's send it back for another round of revisions, and then it can go back out for review, or the editor can do the same thing. I mean, think about it as a way of like a number of checks and balances so no one person has too much power to make any decisions. There are also times when we might add reviewers. So Mike kind of said, maybe you get a bad review where somebody just provides no feedback at all and says reject. And you're like, that's not even a review. That's not helpful for anybody. Or maybe one reviewer says, this is great, except the other reviewer says, this needs a ton of work, major revisions. Then we might add another reviewer to kind of clarify that and say, okay, where does this manuscript really fit? So our decisions are limited. Our decisions are accept, which means it's going to move forward to Lauren in the production side. Minor revisions, which means it's going to go back out for more edits, but usually those edits are really minor, something that you might be able to handle in like a couple hours or an afternoon or something. Major revisions means the paper is going to need significant work. You might have to rerun all the data. You might have to create all new figures or tables, something like that. And then reject is something that nobody wants to see, but really the way that I think you should think about a reject is revise and resubmit, probably elsewhere, but maybe to the same journal, depending on the nature of the feedback you get. I try to publish a lot. I really like publishing. I've received all of these editorial decisions myself many times. That's okay. The papers are different. The quality of papers are different. The audience you submit a paper to, maybe you think is great and the journal just doesn't think it's a good fit. So that's okay. That's all right. That's how the system is supposed to work. So when we think about the goals for the journal, I think that as the editor, as somebody that really cares about the journal and the journal's success, the journal will succeed if we want it to succeed, right? If people review articles for the journal, if people submit manuscripts to the journal will do well. If people want to see something else out of the journal, let us know. And if it's possible, we'll do it, right? Like we added this biography thing, which I think is really potentially a fun way to, provide information about people's histories and backgrounds and kind of the history of forensic anthropology. I love this special issue stuff. They can be really burdensome, particularly on the production side. That's part that I would say that's the biggest drawback of the special issues is, you have one or two people that maybe really drag their feet on getting an article submitted. It really drags out the whole production process for that issue, can really slow it down. So there is that. It's not all roses, but I also think that the benefit of special issues is great because you get so many people kind of focusing in on a topic, and it really makes for successful issues of the journal. The best way to get involved, submit something, obviously. If maybe somebody wants to submit something, but they don't have a great project, or it's a great project's not done yet or something, there's books that need reviewing. Let Greg Berg know. He always is looking for people to review books. Write a biography. Maybe your advisor has been doing forensic anthropology for a long time, and they have some really informational or really interesting things to say about it and about their history and how they kind of got to where they are today. Contact Diane France. If one of them, for whatever reason, is out of the country or doesn't respond, let me know. Let the editors know. We'll get it done. Be a reviewer. We have some people that are great reviewers, and it sucks for them because we know they're great reviewers. So they'll get too many probably requests to review because we know they do such a good job. And there's probably other people that are great reviewers that just aren't part of our system yet. And so the best way to kind of become a reviewer is create an account at Scholar One. I know that no one's going to remember this link, but you can just Google UF Press Forensic Anthropology. It'll come right up. And make an account, and it'll ask for your keywords. So just make sure you put keywords in there that are going to make sense for an associate editor to search for a paper. So maybe you put a keyword as statistics or teeth. The keyword forensic anthropologies in this journal isn't going to be a helpful keyword, right? So just think a little bit about things that you could really help, papers in particular that you could really help provide feedback on for a review. Okay, thoughts on publishing. Mike, do you want to kind of get us started off on this and we'll go back and forth, or how you want to do it?
Yeah, sure. So this is just something that we put together about our experience with publishing, not just in doing that with this journal, but just in general as well. And one of the big things is there's never going to be such thing as a perfect paper, and peer review exists because it makes us all better. Yeah, that was your point, so I don't know if there's any.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't have time to get into it, but there's like scholarly literature on peer review and how good peer review is for like readability of papers. So it's not just like us as editors saying peer review is helpful. There's actually like statistics and stuff behind the importance of peer review. And, you know, as forensic scientists, right, I'm a big believer that all of our work should be peer reviewed, our case reports too. And so the more you kind of expose yourself to peer review, kind of the better you're going to be at the whole peer review process. I'll just say, you know, anytime I do a research project, maybe it doesn't happen, but my goal is to get it written up and published. And I think that if you always kind of have that in the back of your mind as a goal for a project, you're going to kind of start framing it in that way. When you make your poster for a meeting, or you prepare your talk for a meeting, you can, you know, start formatting it also in a Word document so that it's easier to kind of turn it into a paper. You know, I've published a lot over the years, but it took me a long time to start publishing. And I think that is kind of a daunting thing to submit that first paper and to kind of start that whole process. And so I think if you think about it as like an iterative process, the more I do this, the better I'm going to get at it, then it makes the whole process a lot less scary and a lot more of kind of like this deliberate practice that you're going to get better at as you go.
Yeah, and it's just technical steps, right? Instead of maybe feeling kind of scared the first time you're getting reviewer comments back, because it can be kind of weighty to get it back, something you spent so much time on and dedicated so much energy to, and now people are just looking at all the different ways that can be wrong. But that's also the point of science, right? Is that we should be looking at all these different counterfactuals. We should be testing our ideas. We should be looking to falsify our own hypotheses. So not being attached to your own ideas is a helpful practice to get into now, because you're not your research project. You are a thinker that happens to do this research project. So don't get attached to ideas because they need to change, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And any paper or any project, you know, it's just a paper or project. You know, it's not the end of the world. It's not what makes you who you are. So
right. It's not how you'll be remembered. Same thing with a dissertation. It's not going to change the world. It's not it's not representative of who you are as a scientist.
Yeah. That's why they don't just publish them as books, because they need a lot of work. You got to do a lot of editing to make that thing readable for other people. I don't know if Mike would agree with me, but I think that, at least for me, to be a better writer, or the way I kind of got started at writing, is I read a lot of papers and thought, this paper I really liked. It communicated these ideas really well. And I tried to formulate my writing in that kind of way, just to follow kind of structures that other people had set into place.
Yeah, I would agree. I've recently started taking a turn to write more like Richard Jantz, because he has this very conversational tone that explains exactly what he means. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Hold on. Okay. And I mean this in the most general sense. If you have questions about your manuscript, you can always email the editors even before you submit it. It's not uncommon that we'll get somebody that says, I wrote this paper. I'm not sure if it's a good fit for your journal. What do you think? It's attached. That's totally cool. It's all good. Or, hey, I wrote this paper. It's 2,000 words longer than the word limit on the website. Is that okay? You know, ask us these questions. That's fine. You know, the editors are here to make sure that the journal is successful and that you have a successful experience, you know, participating with that journal, submitting to that journal. That being said, submitting a manuscript to the right journal, or a journal that has the right audience, is really important. And I would say, and this is a guess, I have no idea, but maybe half the papers that have been rejected from the journal are rejected just because people are like, I think this would be a better fit somewhere else. You know, either the editors think that or the reviewers think that. And so that's okay. You know, submit it to a different journal that maybe has a wider audience or a different audience. Maybe it's really more of a bioarc paper. Maybe it's really more of a forensic biology paper, right? Like, there's different reasons that a journal may not be a good fit or may get rejected from a particular journal. You know, we really try to turn around reviews pretty quickly. You know, our goal is 2-3 weeks. That doesn't always happen. Reviewers can ask for extensions, people will say they'll review and then they forget and they never turn it in. And so it just happens that sometimes the review process takes longer than it should. It happens to me in my papers too. So it's not like I'm bucking the system or anything, but we do our best to get reviews turned around in a reasonable amount of time. So please be patient. That being said, if you think it's an unreasonable amount of time, email the editor. You know, maybe you got lost somewhere. Maybe you got lost in production. Maybe you got lost in an associate editor thing. So let us know, and we can always double check on stuff. I see Mike's reading something. I'm just gonna keep talking. Mike, just interrupt me. I'll say that taking criticism is hard. You know, criticism is part of the peer review process. I think a good peer review is a fair peer review. And so we definitely have unfair peer reviews where people seem mean-spirited or just mad or something. And we try to either not use those reviews or add another reviewer to kind of weigh out what one person might just be having a problem with, or maybe they're just having a bad day or whatever else happens, right? And so taking criticism is never easy. I publish a lot. Every peer review I get back, I'm always like, oh, all these reviewers, right? But it really does help to make the manuscripts more readable and better. And so I think I'm a firm believer in peer review.
Yeah, same. Oh, and Nick, there's a question. Is there a preference for getting invited to review X number of publications, having a terminal degree, et cetera, or should we sign up to review if we are beginners looking to get involved?
Just sign up if you want to get involved. I mean, we don't say, oh, we need a PhD on this paper, right? We would say we want somebody that knows something about this topic on this paper. So that's really what matters, I think.
Yeah, whenever I get a decomp thing assigned to me, I know all of the best master's level students that have worked way more in decomp than any PhD I've ever met. So I'll send it to them. They know what they're talking about.
For sure. And also, like, just because somebody, like my PhD, right? Maybe I study, I don't know, trauma all the time, but maybe I also just never do a review, right? Or I'm an unreliable reviewer because I never actually submit it. So just because you have a PhD doesn't mean that you're a good reviewer, unfortunately. So there's lots of things that make a good reviewer, right? It's more about the feedback that they get than the degree that they have. All right, Mike, these are more yours. What do you got?
Yeah. All right. So a lot of time we see that people are hesitant to publish things in which they obtain negative results. And we like to advocate that these need to be published because the goal of information is to reduce uncertainty. And this will save somebody down the line a bunch of time, right? This still contributes to the advancement of the field because now we know this is a potential avenue in which we don't have to explore any longer, which is a big piece of information that is still huge. So not being discouraged that maybe the hypothesis you tested didn't work out on some level, that's fine. It contributes to the discussion and is worthwhile to publish. There are so many, I'm thinking about all the different theses and dissertations that maybe came to that conclusion that have just been left to die in the dust, and people are just wasting time, and maybe they'll find it somewhere down the line, but those are super important to publish. So if you find yourself in that position, just remember that is a really important, if not more important than finding positive results, to publish those.
Yeah, just to quickly jump in, like there's so many like posters that I see at meetings that I think of later, and I'm like, well, this person, like somebody brings up something, I'm like, oh, well, there was a presentation on this 4 years ago, but it just never gets published. And so negative results or things that people think are small, simple projects still have a ton of value. And publish it as a technical note. It can be just a couple pages long. Having that information out there helps a lot. And I think of how many hours I've wasted probably getting negative results on something that someone else already knew didn't work, but it just wasn't published anywhere. And so that's okay. It helps everybody else out.
Yeah, it does. And it's super important. And then we mentioned this earlier, but structure is just as important as content. And the way I like to think about writing my own materials and methods is that that's an outline in which I'm going to follow how I report my results. It's a contract you make with the reader, like I did this, this, and this, and this describes my overall analytical kind of process for this project from start to finish. So if I do that in the methods section in my results, I can report it the same way. So you're clearly understanding the thought process as to why this matters, why this came first, and then we did this, etc. Structure matters. So if you start throwing in a bunch of methods you didn't talk about, now we have no idea, is that appropriate? Why did you do that? So just to be a little bit more conscientious about putting together your paper, think about it as an outline and as like your contract with the reader. These are the points I'm going to hit. I hit all these points, and now you know you're done, right? And that helps keep the paper in a very readable, logical structure. Do you have anything to add to that point, Nick? No? All right. Well, another big thing, it's okay to disagree with a reviewer. And we have practice makes perfect in here several times, because it is a skill, is being able to say, I hear what you said. I acknowledge you said this. I don't believe that to be the case, and I can back it up with X, Y, or Z. It's totally okay to disagree with a reviewer. And sometimes reviewers only are challenging you for the sake of challenging you, and they just want a little bit of pushback. That's just the way some people work. But if you don't agree, that's okay. You can say so, just justify it. And if there's any problem with the reviewer, that gets bumped up to the higher levels of editorial. But I don't think I've ever seen anybody, I don't think it's ever gotten that bad. But a lot of people just kind of assume that if a reviewer says something, it is the absolute truth. And that's not always the case. So you know your research better than anybody. And if you believe something, just make your point. That's it.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, like, everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has their own biases and their own things that they like, their own blind spots or whatever. And so, you get a review back and they say, well, you should have done this. Well, you can explain why you didn't do it and why you shouldn't have done it, right? And so it's all about, again, it's this communication of, you make a statement and you support that statement. Reviewers have great feedback. Sometimes reviewers have not great feedback. That's okay. What's important is that you respond to the comments and explain, why you agree or disagree, and then with any evidence you can to support, your position.
Yeah. Click.
Click. Perfect. Okay, this is also more Mike stuff, but I will just say that I think that, at least within academia, if nowhere else, publishing is so highly valued. It's highly valued in terms of you getting jobs. It's highly valued in terms of you retaining jobs. And so the earlier you can start on that process, the more practice you'll get, the better you'll get at it. What else you got, Mike? What do you think? We are getting short on time.
Yeah, well, I'm just something Luis Cabo told me very long ago about publishing is publish a paper and something that you're going to work on for a long time in your career early, so you can always be your own first citation to set up that you are the authority on it. And I have taken that to heart. I always cite myself first now.
That's awesome. Okay, let's move on to podcast stuff.
Yeah, so I can go through this. So these are just some things I've learned through podcasting. In total, right now, we have 13 episodes with over 10,000 listens and an average listen per episode of 773. So the reach is pretty good. It's definitely better than any of the amount of citations I've had on any paper I've ever had. More people are willing to listen to it, for sure. Some things that I have found out is it's difficult to speak about these things sometimes. And a lot of people like to use filler words, and ums. I can't hear that when I'm listening to it. So I'll go through and I'll edit out all of those. And the average number of edits of and ums I have per episode is about 1,200. So if you're thinking about public speaking, I like to tell everybody I talk to, it's much better to take a beat as opposed to string words together. Just makes it seem a little more difficult to understand. Click. So we have listeners from 87 countries. Primarily it's USA, and then you can see here as it goes down. And most listeners are approximately graduate school aged. So this puts the journal in a really unique position in which we are focusing on, or the people that are listening are the ones that are most engaged in the academic research of forensic anthropology and are in kind of the weeds of learning and reading and developing new ideas. To me, this is a really great distribution because it means that people are listening to ideas and incorporating ideas. And yeah, it's nice. If anybody ever wants to co-host an episode, just reach out to me. It saves me a lot of time. again, we're all volunteers. And if someone else wants to read an article and think of questions, that saves me whatever time that takes. I love doing it though, because to me, the podcast is like the best part of a meeting where you just get to discuss research with another person in a kind of a casual atmosphere. And it's really important to think about your research very generically and be able to talk about how you would use it, what it means to you in a way in which maybe it's hard to write in a technical manner. But those are, I think, the important things that stick with people, or how you imprint people with your research, is just to be able to talk about it very generically.
For sure. I was thinking about these numbers last night, actually, and I'm not sure if any of us have the ability to look at it, but I was wondering if listens to the podcast boost views of articles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which I assume it probably would. And Lauren, you don't have to tell us right now, but I don't wonder if that data is accessible as to like how many views over time, and if like after a podcast episode comes out with an interview of Mike about his paper, right? If all of a sudden there's more views about that paper or not, which would make sense, but who knows, how that functions. Okay, that's it for our slides. So I'm going to stop sharing.
And we've got another question. If a thesis dissertation has a copyright at the university the degree was awarded, is it possible for a condensed version to be published from that research?
Stop share. That's probably a better question for the journal staff. Lauren, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if this goes back to whatever publishing agreement, I'm not sure if you sign some sort of copyright agreement for a dissertation at your university. I think the main barrier to republishing a dissertation is just that it's already been published. It's probably freely accessible online. So anyone taking on that project wants it to be significantly different. You mentioned a condensed version, and Mary knows more about revised dissertations than I do, but I would think it would be the opposite, that you would expand on the dissertation to make it into a book. As far as journal articles go, everything submitted gets checked online in a plagiarism checking software. So it comes back over a certain similarity threshold to your dissertation, it would get rejected just because that is self-plagiarism. So the key there is it has to be different enough to warrant 2 publications. And again, you're going to want to check to see if you made an agreement with the university, they might have rules against how you can repurpose or republish.
Yeah, Lauren, I wonder if they're asking, I published my dissertation, but I want to pull publish part of it as an article. How would that affect things?
I think only the plagiarism checking would get you there. If you take too much verbatim from the dissertation, we're gonna see it in our software, and that's gonna be a red flag. But as far as the research goes, I don't see a problem with repurposing the research into a condensed journal article.
Yeah, what's that threshold of similarity?
35%.
Oh, okay.
I believe you can set it to whatever you want per the journal, but I think it's most common to have 30 to 35%. And sometimes it's that 35% is just excessive quotation. So it's, there's different things. Mm-hmm.
You have 100 references and you're just pasting them, then all of a sudden it's going to really give you a weird result. But that's also really easy to see. Oh, this is the problem because of the way it reports out. Mary, did you have anything to add? No pressure.
No, but just to confirm what Lauren said, that that's part of the reason why revising a dissertation is so much work, is because we don't want it to just be the same information that's really available in your library. So often scholars will need to do additional research or expand on some points within their dissertation to make a different document.
If anyone else has any questions, please add them to our Q&A. We're just about to wrap up here. But you're also always welcome to email any of us after the presentation. If you have questions that you think of later, feel free to reach out and we'll try to help you best we can.
While people think about maybe asking another question, I will just say thanks to everybody that attended, and I hope it was helpful. To echo what Lauren said, feel free to email me, email Mike, especially about podcast stuff, obviously. But, we're here because we like doing this and we want to be accessible. So don't don't hesitate to email us with questions or, anything that you might want to kind of talk about.
Yeah, or things you want to see or hear, or things that would be nice for the journal to include. All of that stuff is helpful for us because we have so much going on that it's hard to just keep those plates spinning, as opposed to thinking about new ways in which to do better outreach. But we want to be as effective as possible. So, and that makes this type of kind of relationship so valuable, is that we're able to pivot and include different types of things so rapidly, as something like JFS wouldn't be able to do so easily, So yeah, thanks everyone for being here. Please reach out if you have any questions. Happy to help if we can.
Yep. Thank you so much for attending. Again, a recording of the webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, Florida Press. A link to the recording will also be sent to all the webinar registrants. To get updates about University Press of Florida, archaeology and anthropology books, please visit our website. Forensic Anthropology also has a email list if you'd like to sign up for that on our website, and also check out the Twitter and the podcast. Thanks everyone for attending, and I hope you all have a great weekend. All right.